Welcome back to Hannity. So the political battle between Donald Trump and Jeb Bush over 9/11 and who's to blame continues to intensify. Now, Governor Bush just joined us to respond to Trump's comments. Here with reaction, Fox News contributor Michelle Fields, editor of National Review, Rich Lowry, Fox News legal analyst Peter Johnson Jr. To me, I brought up this whole issue of what Bill Clinton said. We could have taken him. We knew he wanted to create damage in the states. Isn't that when he says that very thing? Isn't that an admission that if you a conspiracy to commit harm against the United States, isn't that a legal basis to take him?
You know, a lot of folks over time have said that if any political figure blew it in terms of preventing the 9/11 disaster, if you were to point to any figure, then it would be Mr. Clinton and his presidency.
But his exact words were, I didn't bring him here because he had committed no crimes against America. We had no basis on which to hold him, although we knew he wanted to commit crimes against America. Doesn't that represent a conspiracy that you could bring them on that charge alone?
And his failure to do so, that makes him complicit in it. Yeah, I guess you can make that argument. I don't think that's a strong argument. A stronger argument was that they had an opportunity to kill bin Laden, and they didn't kill him. And he should have been killed earlier.
Bill Clinton, that is the very representation of the pre-9/11 mindset, which is this is a crime, a criminal conspiracy, rather than an act of war. And look, Trump is absolutely right. This was a massive government failure at all levels that we experienced this attack on our shores, and Bush was the head of the government at that time, but he was only in there 9 months. And the politics here, though, Jeb has to be he's been so reactive this entire campaign.
You think
Trump
that's a mistake?
Set the agenda, set the debate. If I were Bush, I'd be desperate to get out there and start my own fight, not with Trump, but with the left, with the media,
with Hillary,
with the Democrats. Correct.
Well, one other thing, let me go back to what Bill Clinton also said. The only place bin Laden ever went to that we knew he was there occasionally, he went to Kandahar. He would always spend the night there in a compound with 200 women and children. I could have, on any given night, ordered an attack that I know would have killed 200 women and children, and he didn't do it. Is that the same pre-9/11 mentality you're talking about?
Absolutely. Everyone would have taken that shot after we saw those towers fall.
But
and
this was
a
prior
threat
to that.
This is a threat that wasn't taken seriously enough over the course of about 2 decades.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you agree with Rich, Michelle, in terms of should Jeb be responding to this? I mean, obviously, I asked him about it. It's in the news. You know, he said, I have grave doubts about whether Donald Trump should have his finger on the button, so I've got to ask him about it.
Well, I think he should try to run away from the issue, because every time they bring this up, what Trump is doing is reminding people that Jeb's last name is Bush and that he is part of the Bush family. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses of Jeb Bush. But in terms of what Donald Trump said, I do think there's some truth to it. I mean, I don't think he articulated it correctly, but, you know, George W. Bush was president at the time. The FBI and CIA were not communicating and coordinating with one another. We know that many warnings were given from top intelligence officials to the Bush administration, and they did not take it seriously. So there's blame to be passed around in both the Bush administration and also the Clinton administration.
I'd actually put more on the Clinton administration myself, especially based on what Clinton himself has admitted.
And at some point, history has to be taken into account in a serious way. In American history, we know from time to time, go back to the Pearl Harbor attack. A lot of folks said there was a conspiracy. Roosevelt knew about it. So there's always this conspiracy mentality in American politics and American history. I think the Trump shot is not fact-based. I think it's a cheap shot, but it's a great political shot across the Bush bow.
But the
idea
is that
how does he respond? It is not factually
Michelle,
based.
what do you say, Michelle?
Well, the problem is, you know, Republicans constantly say, you know, Obama is responsible and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the time was responsible for Benghazi because they were the ones who were at the top and in charge when this occurred. Well, the same can be said about George W.
Well,
Bush.
there's no comparison whatsoever.
Well, 9 months
there's no
3 years
comparison
whatsoever.
If the roles were reversed,
we're talking about a decision potentially withholding assistance to Americans at Benghazi.
But we're also talking about warnings that were made. Okay, but warnings were given to Bush administration.
Is responsible for an attack by a
I'm not saying he's responsible.
That was declared,
I'm saying
Well, there's a lot of reasons we were attacked, but I'm not going to blame the President of the United States
But I think if the
for
roles
the
were
attack.
reversed,
and I think
you
Donald
would be.
Trump,
You
as
would
much as
be.
I like him
And
and
if
love
Jeb-
him in some ways, he's wrong about this.
But you think a good political move?
It's a great political move, but it's absent any fact,
All right, let me-
and it's bankrupt in every way.
In many ways, we are repeating history. Because I would argue that if the Iranians get their nuclear weapon and use it,
Yeah.
Obama's going to be long gone.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
well, what are we going to?
The cost of the weakness comes after you're gone, usually. And that happened with Clinton. It's probably going to happen with Obama. I think what's most objectionable about Trump's statements about this, though, is his contention that he just would have magically stopped these attacks from happening. But it goes
I think he's
to
talking
his...
about immigration there, but that's a separate
Well, I'm not
issue.
even sure.
Yeah.
Even if he had the same views then as he does now about immigration, you're not going to do it in 9 months, by September 2011, if he's 2001, if he's elected at the same time Bush is. But it goes to his broader critique. The immigration system has been broken forever in this country. We suffered a catastrophic attack on our shores, partly because of it, and it's still
let me
not
add,
fixed.
let me add one other thing. If you see what's happening in Europe right now, there is such a backlash, especially to the Syrian, Iraqi, migrant, refugee crisis. I think that same political sentiment is growing leaps and bounds here, will be a major factor a year from now when this election takes place.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think you really hit it, this 9/11 mentality, pre-9/11 mentality. Post 9/11, we have a pre-9/11 mentality
That's scary.
again
Scary.
in this country, in this administration. And I just...
You can see it in Iran, you can see it with Israel.
in too many different ways.
Yeah.
Too
All
many
right,
different ways.
thank you all. And coming up, Hillary Clinton set to testify this week in front of the Benghazi Select Committee. Now, ahead of her testimony, we're going to explain how Clinton, from the beginning, has changed her story about the terrorist attack that left 4 Americans dead. And then later, Donald Trump is booked to host Saturday Night Live next month. But one group is furious he got the invite. Find out why. Plus, Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal is here in studio to talk about the funding of Planned Parenthood in his state and much more. Straight ahead.